Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the FreoBigfootyPodcast. This week we'll be reviewing the game versus Collingwood, where Fremantle kicked off season 2014 in style with a comfortable 70-point win at Etihad Stadium. And then we'll have a quick look at the Peel game from this week in the Waffle, and then finish off with a preview of the game against the Gold Coast, which is obviously the Purple Haze game. And the Starlight Foundation will obviously be trying to get as many donations as possible. So if you are going to the game, please make sure you put your hands in your pockets and donate some cash there. Joining us this week is our resident Victorian guru, Seppo. How are you, mate?
I'm very good and just excited to come back and watch the comedy show of Richmond and Carlton that just finished, and I'm glad to be in here and talk some serious footy.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a comedy fest, and both teams will probably be needing to improve quite significantly between now and the end of the season if they want to try and do any damage or even get into the September action. They both look pretty average tonight out there, and I know sometimes it's always a bit difficult with a big rivalry game, but they definitely were missing a lot of targets and were pretty average by foot most of the game. All right, we'll just go into our game from our first round game versus Collingwood. So Fremantle, after a sort of tardy start, and Collingwood came out with all guns blazing. But Fremantle in the end ran away comfortable winners, 17 goals 14, 116 to 5 goals 16, 46, and a 70-point victory. And for the first time in Fremantle's history, we're on top of the ladder. So what do you think of the game, Sepp? Obviously you were there, so you can give us the first-hand account.
Yeah, it was great to see a good contest first up. I did think that we, based off the lacklustre pre-season, I thought we might come out of the box pretty slow, but I'm just surprised at how much we actually took it to them after that first quarter, because it was a bit concerning that it was tight, but I knew we'd come out, and Collingwood definitely had not their best 22 out there, and many weaknesses were showing straight away with the way that Cloak was getting monstered by McFarlane and Johnson and Dawson just peeling off. They definitely struggled in certain areas, and I did expect us to wind it back and push out, but not by as much as we did. So I actually tipped us by about 30 or 35 points, but I'm quite pleasantly surprised that we did get that 70-point win and sitting on such a nice handy percentage after really just putting them to the sword, and they really did just buckle and provided not much resistance towards the end.
Yeah, you're definitely right about their forward line without having that extra second target down there. But it was an interesting call, I thought, that a lot of the time you hear teams saying, oh, Travis Cloak was the only forward they had down there, or key forward. And yet down the other end, we really only had our own key forward ourselves in Pavlich.
I know that he certainly didn't do too much of a good job with missing 2 gettable goals. He still got on the scoreboard, but him and Main have missed a couple sort of not crucial goals, but gettable goals. And certainly would have helped if we had someone like Gumbleton down there, but yeah, we certainly performed well without those guys, and Ballantyne and Walters certainly put on the show.
Yeah, I think it was a really good sign for Fremantle that Ballantyne, came back and sort of bounced back for his first game back after the sort of grand final, and obviously there's been plenty talked about that. But also, Ballantyne really usually struggles a little bit away from Subiaco anyway, and or Patterson's, whichever way you want to say it. So it was actually really nice for him to go over and really put in a good performance away from the confines of Patterson's, because he generally doesn't play as well away from home as he does at home.
Yeah, he certainly kicked a lot of bags at Subiaco, and it's usually the derbies or the big games at home he fires up for. It's great to see him get his goal-kicking boots on and get nominated for that goal of the year with that little snap around his body, which was a brilliant goal out of tight congestion.
Yeah, and obviously there was talk in the pre-game about what Collingwood were going to do in terms of the ruck contest, and obviously Sandilands came out and had 39 hit-outs and certainly gave our guys a lot of good use of the ball. It was interesting after the game, with Buckley talking about, Grundy and Wicks and how they sort of they competed reasonably well. And even in the coaches' votes of the year, Buckley didn't give Sandilands any votes, yet Ross Lyon gave him 5 votes. So it was just an interesting contrast between the two coaches.
Yeah, he certainly dominated. I actually thought he'd dominate a bit more, and those 2 younger ruckmen did struggle against him, and it will be probably the same for this week against Gold Coast, but Sandilands really did help our midfield, and I know that first quarter we weren't actually winning those clearances, but it certainly helped, and he certainly fit, got around the ground a lot, stuck some good marks actually, so it was great to see Sandilands, even though he probably could have gone a bit better with in terms of the stats and numbers. He certainly provided a great role for the setup for our midfield.
Yeah, I actually think those two ruckmen for Collingwood will be good in probably 2 or 3 years' time, but they're probably just lacking that physical sort of maturity at the moment to go against tried and true ruckmen like Sandlands and Mumford and those sort of guys who have had 10 plus years in the system, and but I thought they competed reasonably well, but they were certainly outclassed on the night.
And it's certainly going to help once we get guys like Clark and Griffin and Kepler Bradley Black with Sandlands, because I don't think we can have that combination of Sandlands being that almost lone ruckman and have Hanneth there as a chop out week in, week out. He will get burnt out from that, so we really need to get one of the other ruckmen up and more running to
Yeah.
help him out a bit more.
It's an interesting game when you look at, and even if you go back and look at the stats, you think, oh, Dane Beams had 31, Luke Ball had 25. They must have had pretty good games, but I mean, their disposal was pretty average, to be kind. It was probably similar to tonight's game. We're missing a lot of targets, and the kicking for a goal was, I mean, our kicking for goal was pretty average as well, but theirs was quite deplorable at times with the chances. Even still, Sidebottom, who, I mean, he does love running forward at the packs and sort of only runs one way, but even he normally finishes pretty well, and even his was pretty average on the day as well.
I think that was a common theme for a lot of round one games. I managed to watch every single game across round one, split across the 2 weeks, and I did notice the skills are certainly rusty, and the better sides did get better as the game went on. But certainly, I think we'll start to see it now in round two, cleaner skills. And I noticed one thing with our game plan that's changed is more a direct route to goal on that slingshot or coast to coast or whatever you're going to call it. I reckon that brilliant passage of play by Sutcliffe where he got that rebound 50 and pushed forward and put it onto Ballantyne that scored that goal was a great sign of what we can do with a running direct play.
Yeah, I
Looked
think
really
that.
good.
I mean, as you said, a lot of commentators have mentioned it obviously after the game, but that transition, a much faster transition through the middle of the ground, was evident and obviously paid off a few times. It'll be interesting as the season goes along further, once teams sort of get to see what Fremantle are doing in that regard, whether Fremantle can still execute once other teams have picked up on it and accounted for that a little bit better, and B, whether we're able to still get those goal-to-goal transitions. But the good thing about doing that is it'll certainly cause teams to push back further in defence and it'll open up the space for us to kick those shorter passes as well and run through the middle. So it should be a pretty positive result in both ways for Fremantle, I think, compared to what they had last year. And certainly an extra string.
It was great to see some of the midfielders getting involved in the goals. I think Mzungu and Barlow and Fife all sort of pushed forward and got on the scoreboard here and there. So it's hopefully what we want to see a lot more, because I don't think last year we did that enough with the midfielders getting on the scoreboard. So it's great to see that those guys getting involved and really pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, I mean, we had Sheridan, Fife, Hill scored a goal, Pearce scored two, Mundy scored two, and Barlow one. So, I mean, really, it was a really positive performance. And I think, it was interesting that when obviously Colin Sylvia came over, there was a lot of talk about whose position he'd taken. I thought that both the boys, who probably some people would consider to be in jeopardy with Matt De Boer and Tendai Mzungu, were both really, really good on the night. And they certainly said to sort of Colin Sylvia, if you want our spot, you're going to have to earn it, which is all you can ask for.
Certainly a way that's gone, and even with Hanneth and forcing Zach Clark to not be included in this side, there's certainly hot on pressure for spots, and it's going to make it very hard once the guys do start performing in the waffle to come through. So it'll be a great addition once we do get Sylvia in, because he's got a great skill set, obviously some fitness, and it's going to be the iron's going to be hot onto these players that are in the best 22 to perform every week, because the second you slip up, there's going to be someone waiting to take your spot. So it's great to see.
Absolutely, and I personally think Ross Lyon is probably sending a bit more of a message to Zach Clark as well. I mean, yeah, he missed one game, but that was sort of coming back from injury. But I don't think he's still probably 100% happy after injuring his knee in the first place at a music festival. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's making him just bide his time a little bit further there, as well as maybe just giving Hanneth a little bit more time, particularly against a Gold Coast side, just to see what he's got there. Because the reality is, if we have someone go down, we might need to play Clark more up forward and have Hanneth as that second ruck.
Yeah, I suppose, and they've got. I suppose we've got the luxury of coming up against Gold Coast, where they've got young Tom Nichols and Dixon, and I think Day. They're tall. They might use in the ruck. It's it's going to be probably all right for Sandilands to sort of manage that with Hanneth again. If we're coming up with probably a key ruckman, like the Derby or something like that, we'd probably be forced to play Clark for matchups. And that's probably some of the reason why we've kept Hanneth in the side, because he can still do the job and get some valuable experience under his belt.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, I think it was a pretty polished performance first round. And I mean, and certainly compared to what we saw in some of the pre-season games, it was certainly a good improvement. Certainly a step in the right direction, and you can certainly see where Ross Lyon's trying to get the side to go to. And I think, as you mentioned before, we've probably got 6 or 7 guys really who could easily step into that best 22, no problem at all, and perform their role. So no one can just afford to take a day off or have a bad game, because the reality is they're going to be struggling to get a spot. All right. During the because Fremantle had the bye last week, obviously a lot of attention turned to the Waffle game between West Coast alignment side in East Perth and Fremantle's alignment side in Peel Thunder. And obviously for those, I know we had quite a few big footy guys go down there and have a look at the game, and it was obviously the ABC televised game as well. So most people got an opportunity to see it. And at the end of the day, East Perth ran away 19-point winners, but it was a pretty solid effort by Fremantle, considering they only had one player on the bench for the second half, with Fremantle unfortunately getting a few players injured in their first hit-out, with Tanner Smith doing a hamstring and probably out for 8 weeks, which is very disappointing. And also Max Duffy dislocating a shoulder, and he looks like he'll be out for 6 weeks. Colin Sylvia did come off in the first half, but seemed to be okay, and by all accounts from the boys on Big Footy, he seemed to train all right this week, but obviously not in selection consideration at this stage. Did you get a chance to watch the game at all, Seppo?
I did sort of follow the comments and the stats as it was on, and didn't manage to catch any vision of the game, but reading all comments, it seems to be that big standouts were Simpson, Morabito's sort of continuous return to form and playing off the half-back line, doing really well, and even Brady Gray getting in there, involved in the middle, looked really good. So it's great to see that some of those younger guys are having good games and they're ready to go. And Ibbotson, that had a really good game, is close to returning, and he's been named as an emergency, so it's great to see. And it's unfortunate we don't have another Peel game. I think it's this weekend with the bye. It's going to be hard for these guys that are on the fringe, that are trying to challenge and prove themselves. They just don't have the game to do it, and unfortunately they can't go play with another reserve side, I believe. I don't know how it works to the Waffle, but the guys are going to have to bide their time and wait to get back into this round 3 side against the Hawks.
Yeah, unfortunately with the new Waffle alignment, part of the agreement was that any players who weren't playing for Fremantle and Peel had the bye, they weren't able to play in the other teams' oppositions or the lowest reserves teams. So that was just part of the agreement for that to go through. So obviously it had a bit of an impact on Fremantle's planning for this week. But as you said, I think it was a really pleasing effort by Josh Simpson out there last week. I think it's just good for him to get a bit of confidence and get out there and actually have a run and a kick. And hopefully he'll sort of take the next step from there again, because I think it was probably the best game I've seen him play in a league game, even last year when he watched him quite a bit for East Fremantle. I think it was probably, as you said, his best league game so far. Pleasing to see Morabito get through another hit out as well, obviously with 23 possessions. And I think they're playing it smart too, just running him from half back. He doesn't then have to sort of put too much pressure on his knees. He can sort of run in the direction he likes with the ball coming to him, rather than him having to create the play from the midfield as well.
It's certainly his best position is sort of on the ball, on that wing, sort of busting out from packs and running and doing that 60 to 80 metre play. So he is kind of wasted, and it's hard to drop out someone from our half-back line in the best 22 in the seniors. So I think he's obviously biding his time and just playing it easy with the half-back position for Peel, but certainly he'll be, I think Lyons even mentioned it through his recovery and rehab process, that he'll come back into the side through half-forward and get that sort of more rotation through the midfield. So it'd be great to see Morabito finally getting a chance. It certainly looks like his fitness is there. He ran out that whole game, obviously, with the shortage of rotations on the bench. So it's great to see he's getting through that. It's just obviously now a bit of form that he needs to touch up on, and now it's just a matter of counting the weeks, and hopefully he remains injury-free coming through it.
Yeah, I think, as you said, the form of Ibbotson as well was very pleasing for him to get through the game, and I think he'll probably be one of the first players they'll be pushing back in for senior selection in the game. I mean, a couple of guys struggled a little bit. It was nice to see you get Brady Gray in there early, mate, now that Jesse's no longer with us, so you had to give him a bit of a plug early. But, yeah, I mean, a couple of guys, I thought Duffy showed a bit of urgency early in the game before he did his shoulder. And
I've heard Menegola did all right too before.
Yeah,
He had a
Menegola.
bit of a knock.
I must admit, when I watched Menegola play in the, and I know we were pretty average in that pre-season game, but generally his disposal and decision making hasn't impressed me, even when he was at East Fremantle. But he seemed to be a little bit better last week, so hopefully playing in that sort of environment will improve him. And obviously Zach Clark had a pretty reasonable hit out as well, and it wasn't like he was playing average ruckman, because Paul Johnson has with AFL experience, and Scott Lysett, who's also on the Eagles list. So I think Ross Lyon will be pretty happy having Zach Clark get through that hit out and contributing reasonably well as well.
And even having Craig Moller there as well to have a good amount of experience and great mobility, I've heard, from the way he's sort of playing once that ball goes to ground. So it's great to have him plying his trade as well amongst that Peel side. But it sort of lent itself to only that one change that we're looking at now coming in, where we haven't opted to bring Clark straight in and keeping Hannafin aside. And we've only got that one single change with Subin, who was almost ready to go, but obviously that suspension served has brought him into the round 2 side against Gold Coast.
Yeah, and he's obviously been training the house down. And, I mean, I think you've got to sort of reward that, as I said, reward that training. And, I mean, he certainly does give us a lot more. I think his toughness around the packs is underrated a lot. He definitely gets in there, and just sometimes when the boys aren't, 100% switched on, he's always got that urgency. And what we were talking about before, Seppo, I think he has that ability to kick goals from midfield, and I think that's an important thing for us, particularly if we haven't got one of our, ideal key forwards in there. I think out of the other real probably parts out of the Peel game, I think Clancy Pearce probably still needs a few more weeks. He still looks a little bit rusty from his coming back from his injury layoff. I thought Crazy did a few good things, and hopefully he'll get an opportunity this year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if at some stage he does get an opportunity to stake his claim. And obviously Silvani did his job down back and probably had the worst report you've ever seen.
I heard it got thrown out, didn't get.
It was a joke of a report, so it probably ended up getting the result that it deserved, really. So
great news.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the game this week, obviously Fremantle coming up against another side who had a first round win in the Gold Coast Suns, and they had a reasonably comfortable victory at the end against Richmond, who, as we saw tonight, did have a reasonable win, but it's very hard to get a bit of a line through their form, because it was Richmond were pretty, even though they won tonight, you saw the best and worst of Richmond all in one game, which can happen quite regularly. Fremantle have got, as you said, Seppo, just the one change, but the emergency is Lachie Neale, who's probably a little bit stiff to get dropped after being the sub last week. Garrick Ibbotson, who obviously had a reasonable game against Peel, as did Zach Clark. And for the Gold Coast Suns, Matthew Warnock has been omitted, which I thought he was also a little bit stiff. He played pretty well, I thought, against the Tigers. And Jack Martin's out with a shoulder. And ins are Rory Thompson, who is a good inclusion for them, being one of their key defenders, and they probably lack some of those mature key position players, particularly like the ones that the Greater Western Sydney have. And then Cade Kolo-Jasny.
Cade Kolo-Jasny is how you pronounce that one.
Kolo-Jasny, yeah. So he's coming in after a 45 possession game for the Queensland, in the NEFL. I'm not sure the standard and how much to take from that, but obviously he's done enough to push selection, and obviously with Martin going out, it was probably, if you don't get a game after 45 possessions, you're going to be a bit stiffer, you'd have to think. So,
and I think Cade being a very high draft pick, I'm not sure if he was taken in the first round by the Suns, but I think he was always touted to be ready to play, but I think he picked up a pre-season injury like a hammy or something that probably set him back, which means he didn't play round 1, but really unfortunate that Gold Coast have locked Jack Martin, because that shoulder's going to keep him out for close to 3 months, I think they've said, and it's a shame because he's a talented young kid, and he hurt my Supercoach side going out so quickly. So really unfortunate for them, and it doesn't look like they've included Bennell. That was a chance to come back in. So
yeah, Bennell failed his fitness test yesterday with a calf, so he will miss this week, and it's probably, although it would have been good for us to see him play on Patterson Stadium, it's at the end of the day, it's probably a good out for us because he certainly can hurt on the scoreboard as well when he's up and running and playing at his best. I mean,
Even with Jack Martin now at Gold Coast do have a very good midfield with Riscatelli and Prestia and the bald man that Crowley's going to be following around, and also guys like O'Meara and obviously Swallow now being pushing into that middle as well. As they've still got some very good talented players that we get come matched up against.
yeah, absolutely. The main key matchup, obviously, over the day will be Crowley versus Ablett, and then there's not going to be any surprise there who Crowley's going to go to based on past experience. And I mean, Crowley does as good a job as anyone can against Gary Ablett, but I mean, he's just an unbelievable player, and his just ability and his work rate is second to none, and clearly the best player in the AFL.
And it's quite evident just watching that round one game with Richmond and Suns how. I don't know if it's a lack of Conquer or Jackson or whoever Richmond have. They didn't tend to go for a really hard tag on Ablett, and he certainly grabbed that team over the line. And if you don't shut him down or pay close attention to him, he will hurt you. So it's just great to know that Crowley will go with him and will limit his influence. He's still going to get a lot of the ball, but it's just great to know that he's going to have Ablett hot on his heels.
I think the key for Fremantle this week as well will be make sure. And it's a hard balance to find, but I know Crowley's reasonably good at it, is being able to push Ablett forward or, in defence where Crowley can go forward and try and sort of, because he will have a height advantage over Ablett. And if we're able to push Gary Ablett back into defence as much as possible and Crowley can make himself available as a forward, it certainly will stop Ablett kicking goals and being, that damaging play from in the forward half of the ground, because that's where Ablett can really hurt you. If he gets that ball forward of centre, his ability to hit targets inside 50 makes him much more dangerous than if coming from the back line where the rest of the guys have at least got a chance to sort of stop some of their other players, even though they have got class in there, as you said, with guys like O'Meara, Richard Telly, who's come back after a poor year last year, and obviously Prestia as well.
And there's certainly, I think that's the way we won it last year, going up to the Gold Coast and getting like a 45-point win. I know Crowley did drag Ablett around a bit. I think Crowley even got on the scoreboard himself, so hopefully can do that again. But it's just going to be great to see how well our forward line can go against a more sort of inexperienced defence. Like when you look at all the defence in the AFL, the players that they've got named up with Rory Thompson and May and Greg Broughton that used to play with us, Mackenzie, Cameron, and the new guy Sean Lemons. It's certainly one way that we can expose them. If we're going to hit them hard and start scoring over 100 points every week, this is the way to do it. So we're just going to make sure we're winning that ball and getting it forward to these guys, because hopefully Walters and Main and Pavlich that didn't get on the scoreboard much last week can turn it around. I know they'll be hungry too.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head there. If we get enough ball of inside 50, if we get 65 inside 50s like we did against Collingwood, we'll certainly kick enough score to win the game. And it'll really be important that obviously to try and expose and isolate their defenders as much as possible with that one-on-one type matchups, particularly with some of our more mature players. So it certainly will be an interesting way to see how the ball movement, how Gold Coast decide to use it, because obviously they're going to have a bit more pace across the ground, I think, than what Fremantle do. And obviously in that, where it'll be interesting to see where they go for a more handball type thing or where they go the short kick or just try and break the lines. You'd have to think that Matt De Boer will probably get the job on Trent McKenzie from that back line, just to ensure that he doesn't use that sort of raking left foot to open up Fremantle at the back.
It'll be interesting just to see how the actual game's played on the day, because at the moment there's a shower or two developing on the Saturday. It is going to be 25 degrees, but a 20 to 30 kilometre hour wind. So conditions, even the expanses of Subi will help us, and you can see the selections. Like a lot of people have been talking about, why Sheridan is in there over Neil, but I think if it's the expanses of Subi and the running game plan to be able to outrun a younger team like the Gold Coast that are starting to get fitter, but I think hopefully the conditions suit that and it doesn't rain, and I'm not sure how much rain has been coming through with Perth at the moment, but certainly if it's a nice sunny bright day and we can use a running game plan, and guys like Sheridan will be valuable for that. So even though they didn't pick up too many touches last week, certainly did a lot of work off the ball and a bit of 1%ers here and there to really help, and a bit of gap running.
And I mean, the reality is if he didn't do what Lyon had asked of him, he probably would have got dropped this week because when you've got, as you said, guys like Lockie Neal and that sort of look on the hammer, he's obviously doing what Lyon's asked. But it would be nice to see him get a couple of more touches out there. But as you said, he's obviously done what's required, and he's gets another chance this week to sort of cement his spot, I suppose, in there. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the ball when it gets outside as well, when the guys like Stephen Hill and Daniel Pearce, who I thought also was very good against Collingwood last week. It was probably one of the best games Pearce has played in terms of both inside and out. And, hopefully with those sort of, and even Cameron Sutcliffe as well will be another important player because he has got ability to run all day. So he said it'll be interesting if it does rain, Seppo, whether the dew, especially if it's not full rain, but it's just, that slippery conditions, because it'll probably suit Gold Coast better who train under those conditions, where if it's full rain, it probably suits us better to a degree because we're going to have those bigger bodies in there and it'll be a lot more contested ball, and probably, guys like Prestia and those sort of guys are probably a little bit smaller, than, especially when you're going up against guys like Fife and Barlow and Mundy. So it'd certainly be interesting to see if the weather does change, how the conditions suit both sides. Obviously, the other key thing will be how well Gold Coast use the ball bringing in inside 50. Gold Coast probably have struggled. I mean, Dixon's back, I think, this week as well. Well, he played last week but had the concussion. So, but they sort of haven't really managed to find that forward mix that's worked really, really well for them. So obviously Sam Day's gone up there and with young Matera and Aaron Hall, but they can and even Sumner can be a bit hit and miss on their day. So they'll have to make sure they take every advantage of any opportunity that they get down there, because it will, playing Fremantle, you tend to get a lot more limited inside 50s than you would against other sides in the comp.
And the way that Dawson and McFarlane will actually line up on players like Lynch and Dixon and Day, that they're going to have their work cut out if they want to be caught one out. I'm sure we'll be playing one loose behind the ball, and the guys did it pretty well. I've actually noticed a switch almost with Dawson playing more looser rather than that key back post, and we've noticed we've had McFarlane playing a lot deeper rather than that half back role, and it's sort of a shift maybe to prolong Luke McFarlane's career, but it's great to see Dawson sort of pushing up and rolling off a bit more, and it's hopefully kill a lot more of this ball coming in if that's the way that Gold Coast want to play, that we use Johnson, and Johnson did it really well and actually helped our rebound out of the 50 a lot last week, and even through the pre-season there was great moments where he just took it out and used his poise and picked out a good pass out of the 50. So hopefully we get a lot of that this weekend.
Yeah, and it'll be, as you said, one of the keys we talked about before was in the ruck. Obviously Sandlands is going up against Nichols, and if Sandlands does get on top early, it will maybe upset their structures a little bit. Sam Day played the pinch hitting role last week in the ruck, but they haven't really got anyone. I mean, maybe Dixon or Lynch could go up in a pinch, but really, Tom Nichols will really have an important role to play if Gold Coast want to be any chance of winning the game, or certainly keeping in touch with Fremantle. Who will certainly come out firing in their first home game of the season as well. Right, any other sort of points you want to bring up?
No, well, I'll probably put my prediction out there. I think it's going to be a nice, tight game. I've been reading the board this week, and a lot of people expecting a big blowout, but I think the margin will probably be well under what we blew Collingwood away by. So I'm expecting anywhere from like a 35 to 45 point win, maybe something like 100 to 60 or 100 to 70 again. I think it's great to see that the crowd numbers are right up there, that they're close to selling out, and a lot of people talking about on selling their tickets and using that thing that the membership team have set up this year. It's great to see they're doing that, and I encourage anyone that can't make it to the game, the home games over there, to put up their ticket for sale. And I think you get a credit for the team story and membership for next year. It's great to see they do that. So make sure you get into the game, and hopefully these sellout games, as we say, start to get closer to the 38, 39,000 number, not just 32 and empty seats around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see what the Fremantle atmosphere, or like the atmosphere of the game, will be like. I mean, normally Fremantle is sort of like, for the Starlight game, it's always just tends to have a little bit of extra buzz, and particularly because it's going to be the first home game of the season. And I felt last year you could sort of feel the atmosphere get more and more sort of manic, I suppose, for use of a better word, as the season went along. And obviously, so it'll be interesting to see how some of those young Gold Coast players adapt, to quite a hostile environment as well.
It feels quite interesting. Obviously, you're saying it's the Purple Haze Starlight game, but it always almost feels now we're sort of 3 weeks into the season and it's round three or something. Yeah, it's the first home game of the season, so hopefully that doesn't take the sting out of the big event as it is. So it
Yeah.
should be good.
I mean, the other probably I suppose, small concern for Fremantle was obviously with David Mundy, who's been training away from the main group this week. So it'll be just interesting to see if they're sort of just giving him a chance to sort of freshen up, or whether there is a legitimate concern over his ability to suit up this week. So, I mean, if he's out, obviously Lachie Neale would probably be the natural replacement. And it's always a bit of a concern when you see a player like Neale go out, and you've got a player on the edge who's sort of on that injury cusp of not playing. So, I mean, to me, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're looking at the big picture that if Mundy, if he's got any doubt or any sort of niggle, that he gets a rest this week.
Yeah, I'd be happy for it to make a last made call on game day, and a late call up for Neale would be perfect for him and suit him going into those centre squares because he does such a good job of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and he'd probably be a good matchup for someone like Prestia as well. They're pretty similar size wise, and but obviously having someone like the class of Mundy in there, if he's fully fit, would be ideal. Obviously, being especially his ability to hit targets inside 50, because he's definitely our best field kick, bringing in inside to our forwards. I think I agree with you, Seppo, about the margin. I think it'll be around about the 40-point mark. I think if Fremantle get on top early, it could get a little bit ugly for a while then, but if Gold Coast can manage to hold in there for the first quarter, I think they'll sort of manage to be pretty competitive for most of the game, and it might be a 1 or 2 goal sort of margin for Fremantle each quarter. If you look across the lines, you'd have to think that Fremantle certainly if don't match them, have a class above them on each line, and for that reason, you'd have to pick Fremantle to win reasonably.
And I certainly don't see us putting the pedal to the metal and really blowing away the side. If we do get that lead, not like we did with Collingwood, but I can imagine us sitting on, if we got that comfortable lead, just to not take it like we did in the pre-season and not just take it too hard and hold back a bit, just because we want to prepare ourselves for the bigger game with a 6-day break afterwards against Hawks. So I just hope that we get through this game and managed well. We could even decide to sub off Sandland if he's done his job for the day, just to hold him out for next week and really manage the players and make sure they're in tip-top shape.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty interesting because, as you said, with 6 or 7 guys on the sideline busting to get back into the top 22, I don't think any player will really want to be taking their foot off the pedal at all. I just think they're going to just literally say, don't drop me, and look. Particularly those guys who are on the fringe. I mean, obviously, guys like Fife, you're not going to see go down and play at Peel anytime soon, unless he's legitimately not doing it. But particularly those guys who are on the fringe, like Tommy Sheridan, probably maybe even to a lesser extent, but Subin, De Boer, Mzungu, those sort of guys.
And they showed in round one that they're serious. They're here to play. Yeah,
absolutely. So they don't want to give any opportunity for one of those other players to take their spot. So I think they'll be sort of certainly putting the pressure on. And the other thing as well is they've had a 2-week break, so they should be nice and fresh and ready to go. And even though we do have the 6-game or 6-day turnaround to the Hawthorn game, I can't see under Lions watch that he would even let them think anything further than this game this week.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you'd want to add, Seppo, for the Big Footy listeners out there?
The announcements for the board this week is keep an eye on the tipping. We've got our own Big Footy tipping comp up, and also that Tontine sudden death tipping comp that's been set up by I think Sam FFC, which is great to see. I've managed to tip Richmond this week and survive the tip to the next round, which is great to see, and looks like another great competition. Hope everyone's keeping an eye on their Supercoach and fantasy leagues and teams and just making sure they're all up to date with that. And feel free if you've got any suggestions for the banners for round 3 game against the Hawks. I'll be there for that one. If you've got any suggestions, let me know. I'll throw it into that thread. And that's it for this week.
Yep. So this will be, don't forget, reminder, guys, this is the last week that we'll probably have our podcast up on the original feed. So if you haven't already changed over to the Big Footy feed, please make sure you do so this week and subscribe to that. And we'll, as I said, hopefully be celebrating our first Freo win for the season. So thanks again for joining us this week, Seppo.
No worries, and hopefully we can have a big win and keep our spot solid on the top of the ladder.
Absolutely, and it'll be a terrific game next week, obviously, when we get to Hawthorn, and we'll have a couple of extra guests next week, including our resident from the USA in Gill. So we'll look forward to having him on board next week, joining us. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.